Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. The radio and TV version of the show air in over 12 states. This includes both coasts and Silicon Valley. The show also airs in the UK, Caribbean, and Australia. For full show times, plus past episodes of the TV and radio show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. We just launched a free online community to connect past guests, listeners, and others. This community will allow you to network, chat on Slack, or get help with anything else, and a lot more. If you're interested in joining the community, buying some merch, sponsoring the show, or signing up for the newsletter, please go to buildingthefutureshow.com. The show is a proud media partner for the 11th Annual Media Excellence Awards, which are produced by Access Entertainment in Los Angeles, California. The Media Excellence Awards are recognized as the most influential awards show honoring innovation and leadership in all things mobile entertainment, lifestyle, and technology. For more information on how to submit to these awards, please visit MediaXAwards.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Marin and Julian from DULO. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you guys on the show. I think what you guys are doing is actually really innovative, but maybe before we get into that stuff, let's get to know each one of you a little bit better. So how about, Marin, you give us a quick introduction on yourself, and then I'll let Julian give a quick intro on himself.
Sure. Thank you very much again, Kevin. So my name is Marin. I'm originally from Bulgaria. I'm currently 29 years old, and I've moved abroad for the first time 10 years ago, and I've been living around Europe, and currently I'm residing in Amsterdam for the past 2.5 years.
Very cool.
And I'm by education and career as well, mostly marketer, eventually turned developer. I just taught programming to myself 5 years ago. And ever since, I wanted to look to find something to do next to my job, something that's going to give me the opportunity to have the financial and location freedom to basically do with my time what I like on my own terms. And 1.5 years ago or so, the idea for DULO was born, and immediately I wanted to share it with Julian. And I think for the last 1.5 years, we've been working hard on building that. Julian can take it away from here and introduce himself.
Yeah,
sure.
Guys. My name is Julian, also from Bulgaria originally. We went to high school together with Marin. We sat on the same desk. Then after graduation, we kind of parted ways. I traveled a bit, graduated in the UK with a business IT degree. So it was a mixture between a business degree and a computer science degree. Sure. After that, I traveled a bit, lived in Japan for a while, was planning to do a master's degree there, but changed my mind after I saw that the guys are working 15 hours a day with 7 days per year for holidays. So that I didn't like that format. And I came back to Bulgaria, started working in event management, which had nothing to do with what
Sure.
And worked there for 2 years. Then I kind of felt that I'm not realizing my potential or the investment that my parents provided with for my studies. And following Marin's footsteps and another classmate of ours, I also did a 4-month online course in programming, front-end programming. And at the end of that course, I got a job in Berlin. And then we moved together to Amsterdam again in a programming job, and we share a house now, flatmates, and a DULO HQ as well.
Very cool. So walk me through, how did you guys come up with the idea for DULO and what exactly is it?
So what is DULO? Basically what we're doing, we have several things, but the main thing is our product, and that's a dress shirt that's non-iron, that's made from performance fabrics. It's also stretch, it's super comfortable, basically for active people on the move who want to save time, who want to feel comfortable while looking really sharp and stylish. They can just go and have a DULO, and they'll look amazing throughout the day, and they'll feel very comfortable in it. But this started really from the fact that we wanted to solve our own problem. It's a very cliche phrase, but it is indeed scratching our own itch. That's the reason why we started DULO, because even though we're both programmers, and from the most common I would say apparel or a dress code for programmers is a hoodie and a t-shirt.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, quite often both of us actually like to wear a dress shirt, not really in a very formal way, still with jeans or chinos, but I think wearing something like a dress shirt gives you a little more also confidence, but a nicer feeling when you're going outside and meeting people. But before we started our own company, we were so frustrated with the fact that we have to spend so much time, and personally took me about 15 minutes every morning to iron a dress shirt, and I never could do it properly. And at one point I just started wearing a sweater on top of it, iron just the collar and the cuff and leave.
Yeah. I've done that before.
And, the last thing I want to do in the morning, and already I've tried to optimize a lot of my morning routines, and you want to do some productive things and be charged, energized when you go to work. The last thing you want to do is spend time over an ironing board and not knowing what you're doing. One day I was actually in Bulgaria for a holiday. I was sitting there in a networking event when I was meeting some people. It was a really hot early morning. And suddenly in my head came the realization that our country actually Bulgaria has huge traditions in clothing manufacturing.
Interesting.
Big brands like Nike, like H&M, Zara, they're manufacturing clothing there still. The people who work there are actually studying this. So it's like really professional seamstresses and tailors who are operating these businesses. And we thought, well, the advancements of performance fabrics seem to be a thing now, a trend. Why don't we try to combine it, but manufacture it in Bulgaria? And perhaps Julian can take over about the validation, how we came up with how we were convinced basically to continue with that idea, and how we went along finding a manufacturer.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about starting something on our own for a very long time, and it was mostly always around the idea of making an app or some sort of website or an IT project, but we never really got a nice idea that we can commit on. And as Marin said, once he was in Bulgaria, he was at a presentation, I think, about another apparel business. So they were doing something with T-shirts, and he got the idea of why don't we use the advantages that we have being from Bulgaria to actually try to create the product. Because we saw a few companies in the US were doing it, but first of all, they were new even in the US, and as you probably know, things reach Europe a bit in a delayed manner. So there was no one doing it in Europe. Ordering from the States is the delivery costs are quite high, and even more expensive for the import duties, which you have to pay for. The companies that ship the product, they don't cover those. So it's quite a big pain to order stuff from the US from Europe. So we thought that there might be an opportunity, and it was definitely a product that I was looking forward to wearing. So even the samples. So we committed with that, and we planned. The next step was to plan a trip back home, just to see how the industry was, and just talk to different people, see whether we can actually make that product in Bulgaria. And we did that 1 week. We talked to a lot of people, and there was only actually one partner that kind of said that, yeah, we can make that, because there was a lot of people just very confused why we would use some other fabrics other than cotton to make shirts. So yeah, a lot of confused looks, but then at the end we found a very good partner that we are now working with. And from then on, we started about 1 year in product development. We did about 70 shirts.
Wow.
Which, we kept a few ourselves. We were testing, and the majority of those we just gave out to people. It was 3 cycles of about 20, 30 shirts. And the first cycle was the closest friends and family circle, and then we kind of expanded outwards from there, giving it to anyone who's interested in trying it out. Because we were also, another thing that we were doing from day one was to document the whole process, which we started with a blog, and then now it's a vlog and a podcast. So we had some awareness of people actually following the development process even before we hit market. So yeah, and then we opened our web shop about 7 months ago, maybe.
A little more.
Interesting.
It's like
Interesting.
In November 2017 is when we opened on Shopify.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I want to step back for just a second. So how did you guys kind of originally decide on a fabric? Was it a little bit like trial and error, or how did you come to picking a fabric?
So for us, the most important thing was how the fabric feels and to have the properties that we wanted to have in a shirt, mainly no wrinkles. And then everything else that comes with it was basically a bonus on top of that. Because really the inky part in the beginning, at least, was our main focus. So what we did with our manufacturing partner, we explained everything that we wanted to have. And again, fortunately, he has had a lot of experience in the industry, like a really, really, really experienced guy. And he immediately got the idea. That's why we committed working with him, is that once we explained what we want to do, he was not scared. He was not confused. He said, okay, yeah, I understand that. I've seen that. I've done that. I can deliver on this project. So I think 2 months in, or 1.5 months in, after we actually committed working with him, we had to choose a fabric. So we got 8 different samples, which is basically 8 smaller patches, which are about, 10 by 10 centimeters. I don't know how much that is in inches. On a sheet of paper describing the contents of each fabric. And to be honest, at the time, I think we didn't really know what polyester or polyamide or elastane or any of that actually means. What we ended up doing is really feeling each of the little pieces of cloth and kind of discussing it also with a friend of ours who is an experienced executive from the fashion industry, and he's working for big brands as well. So in the beginning, we talked with him a lot about our idea and how we would approach sourcing and manufacturing. So one night I remember, I think it's also in our Instagram, a picture from his floor where we have all the different types of fabric lined down on the floor, and when we chose one, and I think it happened. We just decided on one, committed.
Yeah.
And from then on, we got the first samples.
Yeah, interesting. When Marine's saying that, I actually forgot about that step. I thought the manufacturer just chose the fabric for us. Yeah, but we did choose it, and we got it right, thankfully, the first try. And it's actually, I think the fabric was originally for weightlifting gear.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's where the performance benefits come from. And then, we moved on to the first sample, which... again, being just a sample, we didn't have any resources yet allocated. So it was the only color they have left from that material was yellow. So you can see in our blog, it's a bright yellow t-shirt, bright yellow shirt. The first sample was quite shocking when we first saw it. But when once we touched it, it felt nice. And the other important aspect of it is that it needs to have the properties on feel, but then it needs to look as a normal dress shirt. It doesn't have to, it shouldn't be glossy or anything. It's just, so we kind of luckily got the fabric right from the first try. And then the iteration from then on was mostly the model and the fit of the shirt itself.
Yeah, we did only one major iteration on the fabric, and that was in the end, it was more like an add-on. We decided to use a new technology. It's an application, a treatment with silver ions, which is basically really good tech that gives the fabric antibacterial properties, and you stop smelling, or it doesn't allow the accumulation of smells or odors. And it's really nice, which makes our shirts basically wearable multiple times.
Interesting. So, like, I think the thing, obviously, like, you guys built a shirt around kind of not having to iron it. And to me, I like, it fascinates me because I hate ironing too, especially if you travel and, your shirt, you can spend a ton of time on, like, with a crappy iron in a hotel room. And so I totally get what you guys are doing, but how does it kind of work? Like, I literally just throw it in the wash, pull it out, hang it to dry, or do I put it in the dryer, or does it not matter? And then I don't have to iron it.
Yeah, it's normal machine wash. You can wash it with anything, any machine washing program. Just it has to be under 30 degrees, I think 30 or 40 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
From there, you can just put it on a hanger, then it dries, and then you can just throw it on. So the basic idea of the fabric is that once it interacts with body heat, the fabric releases the wrinkles, so it straightens itself out.
Oh,
So
interesting.
in theory, you get, I mean, it's not theory, it's what happens. It's once you put it on, the more you wear it, actually, the better it looks. So instead of the cotton dress shirt, which you iron it, and then from that moment on, it's gonna look worse and worse as the day goes by. In our case, even if you're traveling, like you said, if you put it in a bag, when you take it out, there's gonna be a little bit of wrinkles because it was just it was folded that way. But once you put it on, after about 20-30 minutes, once the body heat kind of releases the fabric, then those wrinkles straighten out.
Interesting. So that's actually really quite fascinating to me, right? And like nobody else is using this fabric for kind of dress clothes.
Well, there's a few companies doing something similar, but I think they're using a different fabric with kind of a similar effects.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a new product. Well, it's the same idea that we had with, I guess in the sports market, there was this switch from cotton to synthetic fabrics.
Right.
And I guess that's what we predict is going to happen in the more formal and casual wear as well.
Yeah, this advancement of these fabrics actually, so basically the synthetic fibers that we're using have changed and improved so much dramatically over the last couple of years, and they've become so mainstream thanks to big brands like the Nikes and the Adidas.
Right.
Doing all these streetwear, really comfortable clothes that people can wear not only in the gym but outside. And that was one of the reasons that we used as a validation for the idea as well. So people are becoming more familiar, they trust more those fabrics. So why not trust them in a formal apparel as well? And what we're seeing right now is that in the industry, a lot more and more companies are actually starting to implement that slowly, gradually. They're starting with elasticity, so making their clothes stretch. And eventually, probably a lot of big brands are going to have similar products as well, because I think more and more people today, especially millennials and younger, prioritize convenience over anything else. Most people don't have the opportunity to hire somebody to iron their clothes for them or to prepare it for them. So they would rather go and have clothes that don't wrinkle at all. So for us also, one of the important things looking long-term is to actually build a very strong brand around what we're doing, about the message of entrepreneurship and building a business, because ultimately when a huge brand like a Hugo Boss, for example, tomorrow decides to launch a new non-iron performance fabric dress shirt, they can basically bury you with huge marketing budgets and access in retail stores.
Sure. No, that's interesting. So you guys make men and women's dress shirts, correct?
Yes.
Are you guys planning on doing other lines like pants or anything else kind of in the space? Because I think to your guys' point, like, yes, sure, the traditional kind of tech, maybe entrepreneur type is usually just wears jeans, but is there any reason to use maybe like a fabric for kind of dress pants as well? Because I hate dress pants. And so, the fabric's uncomfortable. Everything about it's uncomfortable. I'm not a big khakis fan. So like, would you guys consider doing other kind of products in a, kind of similar space, but for different parts of the body?
Yeah, well, we have a few ideas in mind, but because we're bootstrapping the whole operation, so we kind of need to pace ourselves out a bit. And first of all, improve the dress shirt as much as we can. And of course, the development for the next product is going to depend on the revenues we make with this one. So we need to wait for that revenue to come in and then create the new collection. And I think there's a few ideas that we have to improve on the dress shirt. And then, of course, the next thing would be probably a polo shirt, because I know a lot of people they like the fabric, they like the idea, but they don't necessarily wear dress shirts. And especially now in the summer, you're saying that you would prefer a short sleeve than a long one. So a polo shirt, a dress shirt, and the third one will probably be pants. But that's in the future.
Sure. No, that makes sense. So I'm curious though, you mentioned you bootstrapped this thing. Was there any reason you guys just decided to kind of self-fund this, or did you raise a little bit of money, or walk me through kind of why you made the decision to bootstrap?
Well, kind of from the very beginning, the idea was for us to be very independent when we're building a business. And actually, both of us we still have our full-time day jobs, which we like quite a lot as well. And they're great where we are employed at. And these are companies actually, or we've had experience in companies that are venture-backed. So we've seen from the inside what this does to a company over the long term. And depending on who is your investor, of course, you might have a great experience, but also it can become very tricky, especially if you're having some hard times as a company and then you start answering to investors, you become really reliant on them. And then it goes down a rabbit hole that's really unpleasant. And I've seen some of that in my experience as well. But we've also been influenced a lot from like writings and some of the philosophies from Jason Fried and DHA, Basecamp, for example. They're really have a really strong voice against the the venture-backed world. And that makes sense when you think about it, at least in our heads for our case. We were also fortunate enough to be able to actually pull our savings together and fund this operation from the very beginning. And this is how we decided to do it at the end. So basically, everything we used as materials, all the inventory is paid for by our own finances.
Got you. No, the interesting thing about it is you always hear so many people say, like, you need to quit your full-time job to kind of do this thing, to do whatever you're doing kind of full time. And I've always that seemed to never really make sense to me, right? Like, if you can run your company and work full time, why is that bad, right? Like, I'm assuming at one point you guys would maybe consider going full time if you choose to, but I think just it's, inspiring to hear your guys' story that you guys have been building a business while working full time. So do you maybe want to kind of talk about some of the pros and cons of actually doing that?
Yeah, which one should I take?
Oh, whatever, start.
Why don't you start with the good stuff?
I'll start with the good stuff. Well, the good stuff is that, like Marie said, everything that basically our full-time salaries are paying gives us financial security, so we can pay rent, bills, and stuff like that. And all the savings that we had, plus any revenue coming in, could be reinvested back into the company. So I think that's a very good win that we don't have to take it out and pay ourselves. Also, I kind of like at some point you start discussing, should we go full-time? But then when you think about it, I kind of like the idea of working under constraints. Because if I have 8 hours a day and I know that I'm only going to be working on DULO, I might be tempted to waste a little bit of it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but now I know that I've got the 2-3 hours in the evening, and that I'm kind of thinking the whole day what I should do in those 2-3 hours, and then once I get back home, have dinner, and then I start working on it. For 2-3 hours a day. And I think at this point in the company, it doesn't make sense to have more than 2-3 hours a day, plus the occasional email during the day. And then of course the weekend is a big time that we do a big chunk of the work that we do. So I think that I see a lot of positives with it, to be honest. I don't see many negatives. I mean, if you have the discipline to kind of, there are some social sacrifices, going out on a Friday or whatever it is, or any company events, but I'm usually not a big fan of them, so now I have an even better excuse to skip them.
Sure. Interesting. And then you guys also kind of ship your shirts kind of worldwide, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So everything.
So do you guys? Well, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, what we did is, in fact, when we pulled our finances together, we financed this first round of dress shirts. Basically, we made about almost 800 shirts. And
okay. Wow.
We packaged them well. We shipped them from Bulgaria, where they were manufactured, to here, Amsterdam, where we're living. And currently, our living room is basically our warehouse and base of operations. And every order that comes in, We find the shirt ourselves, we pack it, we write a personal note to everyone, we put it in there, and we send it ourselves to the couriers. And from then on, it starts its journey through any part of the world. So it's a really, really interesting and exciting experience, kind of our garage story as well. And I'm very proud talking about that, actually, because it's really cool. I mean, it's when you think about all the stories that you hear and you read that are very famous, like the Steve Jobs, the Apple origin stories and Google origin stories, and then you think that you have something like that. It's quite nice.
No, I think that's great. I think it makes a lot of sense to keep the cost down. Like, you don't need a big warehouse, or I'm assuming that it's nice to add that like personal touch where you send somebody like a personal note when they order. I think that's really great.
Yeah, and to add to Julian's point about constraints, actually, well, this makes you much more creative, because operating within those constraints, it means that also the fact that we've added our own money in the business, we have skin in the game. So trust me, every euro we spend, we think about it very carefully. And sometimes it's hard to split with your own cash, but it's a very good thing to train and to have, and also gives you this kind of creative thinking that otherwise you would just default to the easiest option, and we don't necessarily go to the easiest option always. And maybe to touch on some of the negatives actually from that, of working within these constraints, or these kind of combination, the balance of full-time job and having your own business. Last week we had a really interesting conversation on our podcast with a guest called Ben Smith, and he's a seasoned entrepreneur. He's really, really interesting and clever guy. And we talked about entrepreneurship. Just was a really open discussion. And one of the things he mentioned, and it really stuck to my head, was that entrepreneurship is a really lonely business. It's a lonely thing. Yeah. And if I imagine us doing only our own company, it's going to be basically just me and Julian, considering the fact that we live in the same house as well. You spend time with this person, and all your ideas and all your thoughts are around this. And for me, actually, going to an office and working on something else is quite interesting. It's quite nice because it gives me a distraction. I meet other people, talk to other people. The constraints of not having a lot of time for social activities after work, basically, this is a nice compensation, a nice way to compensate it, because at work I'm still talking to a lot of other people. You're having fun. You're not really closed up. And I've noticed, at least for myself, is when I work on something, I tend to get very focused on that. And that's kind of, okay, I can shut off the world really well. So I've taught myself the discipline to avoid distractions, but you can take that to the extreme. And I think that's quite unhealthy.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense too. I know it's funny because that you say that. Like, I was recently just on like a work trip, and we got in an Uber, and the guy pulls up in a pretty nice car, and I'm kind of thinking like, okay, like I don't know if you make enough money to afford this car kind of just driving Uber. And so we got talking with him, and he was like a front end developer. And he basically drove Uber a few hours, kind of like late afternoon, early evening, just to kind of get out of his place and actually like have some human contact. So I get, like, obviously you guys are roommates, and I get that, like, but it's nice to have human contact with other people other than kind of who you see constantly every day, if it was just the two of you in your place, right?
I think it's super important, especially when it comes to ideas, because so we can get really in a tunnel, like a hypothetical, like imaginary tunnel of ideas, and we can be just focused too much on that. And to be honest, going outside helps, and talking to other people naturally expands your perspective on life, on your own ideas as well.
Sure. So you guys kind of mentioned it a bit earlier in the show about you guys documented on a blog kind of everything kind of from day one, but let's maybe elaborate a bit on that. Like, why did you decide to kind of document everything, the ups and downs, in a blog?
Yeah, well, the first kind of the seed for that was a marketing guy called Gary Vaynerchuk. He had that concept popularized, like the document versus create, and his whole point was that in this day and age to bring attention to whatever you do, you need to create content. And the best type of content will be authentic content, and the volume of that content as well. The more it is, the better it is. And the only way to do that would be just to document what's happening instead of actually creating original content. So that was the original thinking behind that. And I'm super happy that we started with it and we stuck with it. But along the way, we actually found out that we can use that content to either, but just by sharing the process, we can help other people which are starting out now. Even if they're not in the same industry, there's I think common threads that you get when you start anything. So hopefully by sharing that process, we help other people. And it's always just very interesting to have a look back on those. Like yesterday, for example, I was listening for some reason to our own podcast, to the first episodes, and it's just really, really fascinating to see what we were discussing back then, what we were doing back then, because now we obviously know what's happened now. And you just see the growth of just a bit more natural in front of camera, a bit more natural on a podcast. The images get better, the website gets better, the community grows, the thinking kind of the experience as well comes along with that. But the main thing I think for now is just to share what we're doing, hopefully helping other people, and then at some point we need to channel that more powerful into actually starting to what we're currently doing, just standing behind a narrative and pushing that loudly.
Yeah. And to add to that, like for me at least, because I've worked in marketing for several years, and it's always usually the thing that as a marketer I was tasked to do was to create a lot of content. Like blog posts, tweets, Facebook posts, any of those. And what ended up happening is you're coming to the office on Monday morning and you're scratching your head and you're thinking, what do I have to write about today? I have to come up with another bullshit story. And that's you're thinking is going to drive you clicks and etc. But when you have this strategy of documenting your process, you're not limited actually creatively at all, because you just put the phone on or you start writing and you just write what happened last week. Maybe it's not interesting.
Yeah, fair. Interesting.
95% of the time, it's not interesting stuff. When we start to record a vlog, we always spend like 2 minutes before that thinking, what are we going to talk about today? Because if you look back at the week, I can look at my to-do list, things that I had to do. And yeah, it's not interesting. It's reply to this, meet with this guy, bring a shirt, a shirt to this. I mean, it's really nice things to do when you're in it, but for somebody who might be looking for some entertainment or some education, it's not always the clear way to do it. But on the other hand, we are never stuck. We never have a creative block or a writer's block, if you say so, if you want to call that, with our content, because it's that simple. We just talk about what happened last week or today or something like that, or a thought or something that we have on our mind. It's very, very easy, and it's a great representation as well to learn about yourself.
Yeah, I think to just add on top of that, I think there's a lot of it's a bit tricky because there's a lot of success stories usually that, like, the success part of someone's journey gets covered on media or on the internet, and then people, once they start something and they see that during their first months they don't get much traction, I think a lot of people get discouraged because they compare their beginning to someone else's, middle or end. And through documenting that every day, you can actually go back and see that, like, for the first few months we got a handful of sales, and then you can actually see like organic growth of an average business.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. So what are some things that you've learned that you would like to pass on to other people that are either looking to get into the space or just kind of do their own business? And I also curious to know advice about working with like a good friend, because you guys were obviously been friends for a long time. And a lot of people always say you should never work with like friends or family, but you guys have known each other a long time. It seems to be working out for you guys. You guys live together. So, do you want to maybe talk about some things you've learned along the way and kind of how you guys make it work?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say the best advice or the best thing we've learned is to just start, commit, and trust the process. It sounds very, I mean, this is really generic and like again, cliche advice, but I mean, if we hadn't decided to start from the very beginning with this and just were debating and discussing or thinking about what could it be, we would never have been here today talking to you. So that's just start. Once you have an idea, try it. Don't think about it as building something big or a company, because the usual mistakes I used to do in the very early years when I was trying to build something of my own or work as a freelance developer, something like that, was buy a domain, get the name, get the logo, put a web page on. But in fact, when I think about it now, this is nothing. This is like putting just a face without having any substance behind it. Whereas working for DULO, the way we approached it is really break it down more as a software project, really. Break it down in simple steps and have small wins. Like the first thing was, okay, let's validate the idea. Other people are doing it. The fabrics are good enough. Now, Bulgaria has good traditions in manufacturing. There's a high chance that we find somebody who can help us to combine all of that. Next step, go to Google, find everybody who is in the sourcing and manufacturing business. We found 62 companies.
Wow.
Email all of those. Next step, listen to the replies and connect with those who reply. That was about 20 people. Then those 20, let's say 12 replied back. Go meet with those people and go with a really open mind. That's another thing that we've learned. Like just go with everything with an open mind and try to learn as much as possible, because whatever happens at the end, if you approach building a business as a learning task or a learning opportunity, then you never lose. You're always a winner because you learn so many things. I studied marketing for 4 years. I worked in marketing for 2.5, 3 years after that. The time I spent working on DULO over the past 1 year, even the last couple of months, taught me so much more about marketing because I was working on something that I really care about. Also with my own finances. And that's another lesson.
Sure.
Put your skin in the game. And that's a nice book by Nassim Taleb that was out for now several months. And I really recommend everybody to read it. But if you like invest in your own success, you're that much more motivated to succeed and to show up for work and to do stuff. Another thing that comes to my mind is just don't discuss or spend time deliberating. Just do. Let's say I have an idea how to do one thing and Julian has an idea how to do another thing, let's say a Facebook post for advertising. I have an idea to try a combination between an image and a particular copy to go with that image. Julian has a different idea for the copy. Instead of us spending time discussing and arguing what is the right copy, just start with one and then see if it's working, then test the other and then see which one works best, and then that's the winner. Just try to get emotion outside of the equation.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice, because it doesn't really matter which one, like if you guys argue it out and you pick one over the other, but the one you didn't pick converts more, let your users basically decide which one converts more, right?
Yes,
exactly.
Interesting advice. It's good advice.
Yeah, and don't chase perfection. We wrote about that as well, like very early on, I think.
Okay. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, let's say as a developer, myself, because we're building our own website. So we're using Shopify, but the theme and the look and feel, it's all about us.
Sure. Yeah.
We relaunched the website with our new photo shoot about a month ago. The way we did it, the moment we had a relatively acceptable homepage, which means that everything was linked correctly and working with the new images, we just put it live immediately. We didn't spend time polishing the copy. And over the next couple of weeks, we spent changing things, working on the about page, working on the product pages. Even today, we're changing some things on the website, like copy-wise. And just constantly don't be paralyzed by trying to make something perfect.
Yeah.
Considering that we're an online business, we can change things like that with a
Yeah. I know. I think I've tried to, just in the past when I've done kind of client work on the design side, I've always told people to, almost to your point, push it live, because nothing is a bigger motivator to change something or work on something than if you have something you dislike that's live to the world, like copy, right? Like if you hate your about page, push it live, because you will be more motivated to actually rewrite that about page in the coming weeks, because you're almost like embarrassed to have it up online.
Yeah, that's a good one as well. Yeah. No, it's correct. Yeah, I mean, maybe I think Marine covered the first part of the question. Then the second part you asked about working with a friend, someone you know.
Sure.
And I guess I think there's luck, of course, involved in that, because you never know how you're going to work with someone until you work with someone.
Sure. Did you guys work on anything else together before DULO?
Well, we were colleagues in the same company for 1 year.
Okay,
but did you work kind of day to day or with each other? Or?
Not really. I mean, we started.
Okay.
We started. I mean, we thought we started something like when Marie said we're just getting a domain, putting a logo on it, and then
right,
a business running. So we never had issues amongst each other. We had more of just a lack of experience at that point.
I got you.
But there was. I guess you just trust it, right? If it works, it's going to work. If it doesn't, then it doesn't, and then you move on. But I think we kind of had a good feel of how we can communicate and how we can work, because we've also been discussing ideas, and we can see that we kind of have the same similar understanding of any, sports, nutrition, business, books, whatever, lifestyle. So you kind of just take into account those factors and hope for the best. And yeah, I think that about sums it up.
Yeah, and I think, well, I can add a little bit to that as well, is the moment for me personally that really made it very easy to work with somebody else, because before DULO, everything I was starting, I was kind of thinking it of like, I want to do it by myself, especially during because the things that I was trying was mostly like freelancing, web development, front-end development. Right. And I kind of like the idea of being in control of everything, moving quickly and not answering to somebody else. However, what usually happened is after 2 months, I lost interest in what I was doing.
Yeah, fair.
Due to lack of traction or like really annoying clients. And I would just stop doing it and continue with my day job and think something else.
Interesting.
And start something else. But once we started working with Julian, for me personally, and that was very early on, that we decided on this approach to just do things instead of debating them. We basically eliminated the variable of like high emotions and subjective opinion within the work.
Okay.
And that makes it very easy. If you're not emotionally tied, subjectively tied to your work, and you let the market decide what is good, then it becomes very easy to work with somebody else.
Sure.
And for me, that was very liberating because I work with Julian, I know I'm also accountable to him. So when he's working on a Saturday and I'm not, and I'm sleeping or eating or being out, I feel guilty in front of myself. Yeah, if I know, this guy's working, I need to deliver as well. Sure. Or when there's times when I'm tired or traveling, I know that he's there to always pick up the work that needs to be done.
Sure. So how do you guys make sure that the other one feels like they're basically contributing an equal amount? Maybe like, do you guys track hours? How do you guys kind of handle that?
Yeah, it's again something I think we're lucky to have a relationship that we've known each other for so long, and we kind of very honest to each other. So, for example, I prefer working in the evenings, and I know Marine's not going to work in the evenings because he wakes up in the mornings, and then it's a natural rhythm of our personalities as well. So I know that I'll wake up a bit later, but then he's been working in the morning, and then in the evening he can relax knowing that he's done his part. And then I naturally start doing my part in the evenings. Same for the weekend, same if we're traveling. For example, if one of us goes back home, we don't expect that person to be involved 100% because obviously we're going back home, seeing family. So there's a certain level of understanding that that at the end of the day, we're both certain that we're both committed the same amount. We've invested the same amount, but there's just a few situations that you have to have the understanding that someone's working more this time, and then the other guy kind of makes up for it some other time.
Yeah, and we don't really track hours or anything.
No, it's just it kind of felt naturally, like we split up the work basically, and then everyone knows what they're doing, and we just maybe even we do some stuff without the other one knowing, then we just let them know, okay, man, I changed something on the website. Okay, cool. Then,
yeah, for example, Julian is the one who is responsible, kind of took ownership naturally of the blog. So the weekly blog that we have, also like engaging in communities and distribution on that. I like kind of started and continued with the vlogs. So the editing, I really enjoy like tinkering with video editing and sound editing software. So for me, it's really fun to edit the podcast or to edit the vlogs. Like, and it's kind of, I don't know, we found what is interesting, and that's the best thing about when you're working on your own business, is that you find things that are interesting and you work on the things that are interesting.
Sure. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like for me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the two big things is trust and kind of communication, right? And obviously you guys have kind of complementary skill sets, but it boils down to just like trusting and kind of communicating, you know, that you guys are obviously both working on it. You're both committed to this, and you don't really need to track hours to say like, you put in 3 more hours than I did this week or whatever, right? Like there's none of that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. It's exactly like that. Actually, to try to think about it, it's very hard to say how many hours we put for DULO per week, because it's really like, right now we are technically working, even though we're having this conversation, it doesn't really work. In the morning when we have to do, like when we're packing shirts and going to the couriers, is that work? Well, probably. And we had a funny discussion like a few days ago about once the time comes when we have enough volume of orders per day that we can completely rely on the business to sustain our lifestyle. Yeah. That's going to change the dynamic, like our personal life dynamic quite a lot, because to be honest, we spend a lot of time, but because we taught ourselves to work within these constraints, we're very efficient in the amount of 2-3 hours per day, and filling a day of 8 hours with work. I don't think it's going to be possible in like to every day. Yes, for sure, some days are going to need that, but most of the time, I think, of course, depends on the scale of the business. But I'm talking about, let's say, the next 1-2 years. If we can keep that 2-person operation, this lean, mean machine that we have here. This can be a very interesting experiment as well, and a learning opportunity for us, because we've never, like, our days currently are pretty much filled with you wake up, you do your exercises, workouts, work, go to the other work, come back, work, eat, go to sleep, and then continue, you know.
For sure. Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. Like, does like you answering emails while watching TV late in the evening on your phone count as work? Like, it kind of does, but it also kind of doesn't. Or if you're like watching TV, kind of just hanging out, maybe having like a beer and packing some shirts, is that working? Like, so I get that, right? Like, it is, but it isn't, right?
Yeah. I mean, on Sunday, I was outside our house. It was a really great sunny day in flip-flops and shorts, and I was preparing. I don't know what I was working on. I don't remember exactly, but it was work related. But I was having my coffee, listening to music, and said, that's okay. That's nice. I feel productive, but it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and you're right. Like, the dynamic will probably change, especially if you have the opportunity to maybe hire somebody to do some of the stuff you guys like. I don't know. Like, you could maybe have to hire a team of people to pack orders, just because like the two of you can't handle that many orders in one day, right? Like, if you're getting a ton of orders, at some point you guys won't have the time to pack them all, right, in a reasonable amount of time. So you might have you might have to delegate some of that stuff at some point.
Of course.
Yeah, but it's I mean, we once you said it, I thought about it, but I never thought about it previously, because it's just so far ahead in the future. And then once we reach that point, I would guess that's when we start thinking about it, but it's not something that we are planning for and accounting for now.
An interesting thing to just add in here was I read a tweet today. It was an article actually. It was tweeted about Kylie Jenner. She ran for the past year, I think, a cosmetics business that generated $900 million of revenue.
Yeah,
with an operation of 4 or 5 people. I mean, you can go very big and be very.
Yeah. That is really good advice. Hey, like I never really yeah, you're right. Like you can run $1 billion company with 4 or 5 people. It's pretty impressive actually.
Yeah. And people wonder the threat. We're discussing like making calculations, like Apple has that many employees. So they have like 2 million euros revenue per employee. And in her case, they have like 26 million euros per employee. Like it was,
interesting.
It was like 150 million per
yeah, it was something like that. It was like, what?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing to go back to the funding mindset, because once you get funded or you seek funds, then you go into the mindset of spending that money instead of when you don't have that funding, you're in the mindset of making money.
Sure.
If you follow that logic, and if you don't take any external finance, you're always going to be able to create the revenue yourself, and then you don't need to, because if you get whatever the number is in investment, the natural thing is always to get more people, to get a bigger office. The lunch menu becomes more exotic. You get, a few table tennis, football tables, but that's not going to move the needle forward as much as if you've learned to actually make the money yourself, right?
Totally. So we're kind of coming to the end of the show, but is there any other advice either of you have kind of learned over the last little while that you would maybe like to share with people?
Yeah, for me, the main thing is always just start something and commit to it. I see a lot of people at their full-time jobs, they're not really happy with them, and they're just stuck with them because they don't think there's another option.
Sure.
But given the day and age, we have so many opportunities to build a business. You can, you can build anything pretty much by yourself using the internet. So just my biggest advice would be just start something, commit to it. Don't overestimate the complexity, but don't underestimate the time and effort that it's going to take.
Sure.
Just be patient with it, stick with it. And I guess another thing that comes along with that is the self-doubt and confidence. And I read a nice piece last week that confidence is about keeping promises to yourself.
Sure.
So as long as have some goals, have some routines, have some, and just follow along and stick to them. And then the confidence builds up. There's a momentum going on. And then once you commit to something, you see that the initial results, I think it's easier to continue with it, but you need to stick with it.
I think that's really good advice.
Yeah. And I would say just trust the process. That has been something I've told myself, and I keep telling myself all the time, is because everything you do is choices, basically. You make some decisions and there's an outcome out of that.
Sure.
And I think Paul Graham had a blog post like he wrote a long time ago, when one of the things that I remember from one of his blog posts was that you don't move towards a goal, but you move out of promising situations. And
interesting.
That's always like stays in my mind, and it's just, I think it's just that thing of trusting the process. Move forward and make sure that just stick with it, commit, have the discipline to stay long enough. And I actually believe that if you stick long enough, eventually you win, or you end up on the positive side of things.
I 100% agree. I think that's really good advice, guys. But we're out of time, so let's close the show with mentioning where people can get more information about you guys, kind of read the blog, get more about the podcast and the blog.
So we have several resources. Everything is on our website, which is weardulo.com. That's weardulo.com. And actually, for Kevin, for your show, we actually made a special code for all the listeners. If they want to check out the product and get their hands on a DULO shirt, we made a special code for 15 euros off. That's about $25 off. And we have free delivery as well. The code is BTF15. So if one of your listeners is interested, they can just go to our website and check out, add the code in the appropriate field. But other than that, the blog is on wheredulo.com/blog. We have a podcast, and the podcast is on wheredulo.com.
Yeah, just go to the website. We are at wheredulo. The handle is everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the website is the same spelling.
Good one.
Perfect, boys. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and have a good rest of the day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, thanks for having us on. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, guys.
Really fun.
Okay. All right, guys. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. To join the free community, buy some merch, sponsor the show, or sign up for the newsletter, please visit the website at buildingthefutureshow.com. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.